up? Sven Diesel here. We're going to be tying up the Peacock Stimulator. Basically, call it that because we are going to be using a lot of Peacock for the body and for the head. So we're going to go ahead and start out. This is a Firehole 718. This is size 10. I think this hook was designed for this particular fly. And we're going to be using some Semperfli wax thread 8/0, and this is the color red. Now we'll go ahead and start our thread on the shank of this hook, working our way down the shank. I'm using the tag end of the thread to basically keep my thread wraps as close as possible. We're going to be using a lot of materials on this shank, so uniformity is something to good practice, but not necessary for this since we're going to be covering it. We're going to be doing the tail out of some elk hair. This is by Nature Spirit. It's select cow elk. This is a bleached. And we're going to be taking out, I don't really have a good measuring system for this, but basically this is like a half a pencil. I like to do my tails a little bit more sparse. It helps to make it a little bit easier, but we'll brush out the underfur, go ahead and throw it in our stacker here. This is a nice slide stacker. I think this is from Gallup's Slide In. Just pull these fibers, hairs out, make sure the tips are aligned, don't have any butts in there. We'll go ahead and place it so that we got a nice little tail coming out. And the way I do this is I basically do some loose wraps up the shank of the hook, basically up to where we're going to create our hump that will basically be the basis for our wing. And as I get to that point, I just crank down with some secure wraps, work my way back down with a little bit, not snugging wraps, but a little bit tighter as I work my way down. And you see that hair wants to just twist around the shank. We're gonna secure that, but we want to just make sure we got it in place. So clean out those butt ends, and you can see right here we have a little bit of that hump already, preparation for our wing. But I'll work my way up and down this, twisting the hair so that it's not, going on the underside of the shank. And then now I'm going to start cranking down on this, and you're going to get some loose threads from your initial wraps this way. So if you were doing like a floss body or a silk body, that would be a problem, but for what we're going to be doing, it's not going to be. And a little trick here is to build a taper. Leave these wraps up here towards where we cut the elk a little bit looser, and then kind of really crank down here back by where the tail goes into the body. Now we're going to tie in a few different materials. We're going to secure everything down with some gold 0.2mm wire. This is by Semperfli, so I'm just going to cut off about 5-6 inches here, and I'll secure it on the top of the shank. And then you don't want to load this on because this is a dry fly, but we do want this to be durable. For our hackle, I've got some of this Whiting Farm Red Label Dry. This is a medium ginger. I really like this this color, especially when we're going to be doing a peacock body. It really accents it really nice. And so we'll go ahead and tie that in by the butt section, and I like to leave about 1/8 of an inch before my fibers. That way I can make sure I get the fibers aligned properly on that initial wrap. So now we're going to be using for our body, this is just some peacock. You could use some peacock curl. I like to use it off of the actual feather. I find the fibers just seem to be a little bit longer overall. And we're going to use about 3 fibers for this, and I'll go ahead and tie this in by the tips since those tend to be the most brittle. And we'll tie them in, and don't crank down on that too much because I don't want to use the thread to break that on my initial wrap, but to kind of tie everything together and make it secure, I'm going to put some Zap-A-Gap down and just very light coat. I don't want to let it get buggered up as I'm palmering that peacock, but just enough to hold it in place in case something breaks or the bite, a fish bites it. It's not going to destroy our fly on the first take. So I'm going to palmer these 3 fibers together, just working my way up the body, trying not to get Zap-A-Gap all over my fingers. But we're going to come up to about where we started to build that hump, where we cut off some of our tag ends, our elk hair, and I'll go ahead and do some securing wraps behind, and then I'll do a few in front, binding that peacock in real nice, and then we'll go ahead and snip those ends out. I don't like to tear them because I don't want to have it one for some reason slip off, but and get zap-a-gap everywhere. So take our hackle feather now and begin to palmer it around. Figure out by leaving that spacing, I can get my hackle going the correct way that it wants to go, and I'll start working my way up this body with about segmenting these wraps slightly, just to create a lot of bugginess and almost make it caterpillar-like characteristics. And as I get up to our tie-off point, I will tie that off with a wrap over, maybe 2 wraps behind, and then a couple wraps in front. And at this point, we're going to just go ahead and snip that out and secure that, just making sure it's nice and in there. And now we're going to make it durable with this wire, making sure to counter rib our hackle and kind of weaving it in and out, trying not to trap as many fibers as possible. This could be difficult. If somebody out there knows how to do this perfectly, I will respect them greatly, but basically I'm going to palmer it around, almost doing it with the same spacing that I did the hackle, maybe a little bit loose, more distance in between my wraps, but really just trying to minimize trapping those fibers down, zigzagging it around. And we're trying not to add a ton of weight with this wire, and so we're basically going to tie it off right there. I'm not going to do any extra wraps with it, but just secure it, snip it out, and we are done. So now we're going to create the wing. So we're going to trim out some of the hackle fibers so the wing lays down nice. I'm going to take, we used about half a pencil of the elk hair for the tail. I'm going to use a full pencil to maybe a Sharpie, depending on how full I want that wing. I found that if you go with the Sharpie, it's very difficult to make the head, but you got a bigger wing. Whereas the pencil, it's easier to make the head, but you don't have quite as much wing to it. So since we're going to be doing a pretty heavy, dense head on this with the hackle, I'm going to do, this is about a pencil. So we make sure our tips all aligned, cleaned it out, and I really don't like these fibers. I cut it from the very bottom of this hide. So let's just go ahead and we're going to do that again real quick. I'm going to basically cut out a different section of elk hair, clean them out, and we'll stack them so they're even. That's the advantage to tying and doing your own flies, is you can decide when and what you want to use, and if it doesn't look right, you can go ahead and undo a few thread wraps and replace it. So luckily I started and saw that before I tied it in, but I like this a lot better. There we go. So let's go ahead and do a couple loose wraps here, and then work my way back to that hump we created earlier. And then really now I'm going to crank down, and I'm going to pull a little bit of those fibers back, a little bit more, and then work my way down. I guess I could have done a little bit better job on pulling the fibers around, but we'll make do with what we got going on here. So we'll cut out those back butt ends, and just try not to cut our thread. I really like how that turned out. It's a nice full wing. Spacing's good around there. Make sure we clean up that eye before we get too far into our thread wraps. But as I'm working my way, I'm just doing some really tight wraps now as I work my way back, and then holding that wing in place. And you're ruining your hackle job on the body for your Instagram pictures, but it's going to look buggy and fishy. So check out that wing. I like how it is. I'm going to just make sure it's on center, and that looks really nice. There we go. I like, that's a pretty good dense wing there. So the next step of this is going to be to tie in our materials we're going to use for this head. The last material will of course be the hackle, so that will be the first material we're going to tie in. And so I have a same piece of hackle from that medium ginger, and I'm just going to go ahead and tie that in now by the butt end. And I usually like to tie it on the side away from me because my first wrap is going to be towards me, but you can do whatever you're most comfortable with. And we'll go ahead and secure that, leaving a little bit of spacing. Again, that's just a habit I do, and we'll trim out that butt end. And now normally you do a dubbing or a hot spot, but we're going to do some more peacock, and so I'm going to take 3 fibers and go ahead and tie those in now, and trying to fill in that little bit of a gap in the smoothness of this head. And we'll go ahead and put a little bit of Zap-A-Gap again just for durability. This will also help when palmering this peacock to keep it where I want it. And let's do a little test. Oh yeah, that looks nice. So let's go ahead and get our palmer this up all the way to the almost right behind the eye. You want to make sure that you leave a little bit of spacing so you don't crowd the eye too much. But as we get that where we like it, we'll trim those out, and now we are ready to go. So let's go ahead and palmer this hackle around, trying to leave a little bit of peacock. I don't want my first wrap here to be in between the peacock and the elk. I want to basically have a little bit of peacock visible, and so because I left a little bit of spacing, I'm going to actually wrap this opposite of the way I normally do it. The fibers just seem to lay better this way, and we'll go ahead and do a nice dense head, working our way up towards the eye. And if you got some that kind of jet forward, that means that you got a little bit too close to your previous wrap. You can use your hands to kind of preen those back. Keep a real good hold on the tip of this feather. It might be a little slippery. You could use hackle pliers, but I'm just going to wing it. We're not really doing a wing, we're doing a head, but it sounded funny. And as we get up towards the eye, we'll go ahead and tie that off. Little critical key is don't crowd the eye. It makes your life miserable. I don't know if the fish are going to care if you get an extra 2 wraps on there, but we'll go ahead and do a whip finish, trying to minimize the amount of fibers we trap down with our thread. And as we do so, now that we have a single whip finish on there, I'll trim out my hackle, and then I'll take my tips of my scissors and try and get any of those that I tied down or any that are stragglers, making sure not to, cut the hook eye with our scissors and ruin them. If you get any trap fibers that really are bothering you, you can always heat up a bodkin and melt them. But for this purpose, we're just gonna fish this, so I'm not too concerned on a perfect job. Fish seem to like a little buggier, but I am going to put a little bit of UV resin on that thread just to increase the durability, and that actually absorbed up to the top, so we are golden. That worked out real nice. So let's go ahead and just cure it up. So there you go. This is a Peacock stimulator. I've had enormous success with Peacock. I've had enormous success with Stimulators, so why not combine the two? Peacock comes in a bunch of different dyed colors, so you can go ahead and do a bunch of color combination. Hackle comes in a lot of different colors, and the elk hair you can get in a bunch of different colors. So tie it up, fish with confidence, and thanks for watching, and hope you enjoyed it.